so true still today. And so this is an adorable picture. This is me and Daddy. When how old was I? Was that like my second Christmas?
Yes, that was your second Christmas.
And that was a dress that Mom made. My mom loved sewing. My grandmother was a seamstress. And I always had these like adorable little dresses, which weren't so adorable when we all went to Disneyland when I was in 5th grade. And Mom sewed all 5 of us matching outfits. My sister is here on this webinar. She can literally tell you I was in 5th grade and my mom sewed us all the same, all 5 of us, 2 boys, 1 girl, matching outfits with matching fanny packs and matching scrunchies so we wouldn't get lost in Disney. So, I mean,
you didn't get lost though, remember?
I did. No one would come near us because it was like stranger danger. Someone just said we were like the Von Trapps. So yeah, I was like, oh my gosh. So again, that's me and Daddy when we were little. And that is our headshot that we took together when we wrote UDL in the Cloud. But although it looks like we're just sharing these adorable photos about ourselves, what we're actually doing right now is a really important part of teaching remotely, which is establishing instructor presence. Okay. Definitely. All of us have like a personhood. All of us have a personality, and we get to know that personality when we are on the ground face to face with our teachers. And in some ways we lose a lot of that presence online. And so we're going to talk a lot about that presence today. So I'm going to stop my share just for a second because I want to see who is in this room. And I'm going to give you a poll, and a poll is just going to magically pop up right on your screen. And it's going to ask you, what level are you, let's see, what level are you in when you're working in schools? Are you elementary? Are you secondary? Or are you working in higher ed? And my silly poll doesn't look like it wants to work. So yeah, that's great news. All right, so I'm going to ask Lindy, sweet sister Lindy, to fix that poll for me, and we're going to dive into a couple of questions. So I am going to predict that the variability of all of you is wide and beautiful, and that we have people here all the way from pre-K to higher education. So let us dive in. UDL in the cloud, and what are our best tips for moving forward? So the introduction questions is, you know, one thing that people say is like they didn't really realize that we were kind of a father-daughter team. You know, my married name is Novak. And so, Dad, what was it like to write a book with your favorite oldest daughter?
It was actually a terrific experience. The process took about what, 6-8 months from start to finish. And it was very, very collaborative. We were bouncing things off of each other constantly. This would be a situation where we would go to work during the day at our day jobs, and at night we would get to work on the book. And, you know, we didn't actually set up any schedules as such, but it all kind of flowed very, very easily, where, you know, we came up with the initial design of, you know, the number of chapters and what each chapter would talk about. Then you took a chapter, I took a chapter, and then we would bounce it back and forth and give our ideas and our feedback as to what we thought would be better. And then, you know, we kind of worked from there to the point where we got it ready to send off to the publisher and the editor and start the process with the third and the fourth wheel of that process. And even that was very painless and easy to do. So this was just a wonderful experience.
And so again, as we had talked about before, what's unique about this is most of the time when you're thinking about like reading a pedagogical book, it's like you're looking for something that's just focused on higher ed, or you're looking for something that's just focused on elementary. But what we know about creating a really robust learning experience in the cloud is that those patterns are consistent. And so, you know, it's a very unique thing that, as I can see, this is what's so amazing about this crew here, is that the poll wasn't work and everyone just jumped right in. And they're like, you know what, I'm just going to put it in the chat. And so, you know, we have somebody who's early elementary, and then we have higher ed in the same chat. And what I want you to recognize is that we can actually support each other and share the things that we're doing, and they're going to work across the board. Yeah. And then why now? That's pretty obvious. Why now is because in real life, instructors take about 20 weeks to take a course and transition it to be online. And we had about 3 days in the state of Massachusetts, where the governor said, guess what, you're not going to school anymore. And the commissioner of education said, all schools will have their remote learning plans in place in early April. There were 3 days between those announcements. I mean, between the announcement and April 1st. And so what we recognized is that everyone is doing the best they can with the tools that they have. But now we're given some space where we have a little bit of legway in the summer to really think about if we have to continue to provide remote learning or blended learning, or if we're going to have these intermittent closures, what do we need to know about how to do this better? And a lot of this we're figuring out as we go along, but what's really important is to know, where are we headed? And so as we dive into this, what we want to know is, today we're going to be focused on how instructor presence allows for this multiple means of engagement, increases motivation, increases the ability to put in effort and persist, and increases the ability to cope with this crazy emergency remote teaching that we have. We're going to talk about scaffolding and focusing on time management, how that's so important in order to get your students to actually complete work, to express what they've learned, and to take action on goals. And then lastly, how the cloud is an amazing place, and how you can design actually an entire course or an entire unit focused on providing multiple means of representation for students, not only using the resources that they have available in the cloud, but allowing them to recognize that authentic resources exist in their environment, and we don't have to post them for them to use them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Dad, do you want to start talking about the importance of instructor presence? And while Dad's talking about this, what I want to know from you is, how many of you have been in a webinar where you suspected that the presenter might actually either be a robot or have literally no personality at all? Okay, so what you're gonna do is, as Dad's talking, I want you to just like go into the archives of like a webinar or something online, an online course where you're like, is there even an instructor in this course? Like, what is happening? Okay, so you can put in those comments, and Dad, I'd love to hear from you. Why is instructor presence so important?
Instructor presence is so important because so many times in webinars and courses, this is how it's done. Engagement. We have to find a way to invite our students along with us on the journey of the course. They have to want to come.
Stop reading the slides. Stop. Don't do it. Don't do it.
But that's unfortunately how it happens, though, that people are afraid for some odd reason to be themselves. I mean, I don't know about you, but the courses that I have really remembered from my college, which was a long time ago, were the ones where the instructor was there. I mean, they took over the room and they led you to a point where you wanted to learn this stuff. And just because we go online doesn't mean we can't do that. So we want to make sure that this course is ours, that we are basically filling it with our presence, our personality, so that this is becomes a conversation between you and the students. They learn to know you, they learn to trust you, they learn to really realize that you are the biggest cheerleader for this topic that they could ever possibly want. Because if you can't make that personal connection, nothing else is going to work after that. You know, if you can't get them engaged first in you and then in the topic, they're just reading books for the sake of reading it, and they're not going to like it. Because there's no reason for them to do it. So, you know, creating that social presence first and foremost, you know, being there, you know, setting some reasonable expectations as to your response time, making sure that they know you know this stuff well. And, you know, if you're reading the PowerPoint presentation, I don't know about you, but that to me automatically says, wow, you know, the PowerPoint presentation is the presentation, the teacher is not. You know, they don't know it well enough to do it without it. You know, if they fill it with so much text that they have to read it, you know, this is a big problem that we're not going to get over very quickly, you know, so it's got to be more than that. And, you know, it's got to be something that looks good, that works well, the instructional design is there, and that you're there not to really deliver content, because that's what all your resources are going to be. You're there to facilitate the discourse, to get them to understand, to get them to really want to dig a little bit deeper. And yeah, there are going to be certain times where you're going to have to do the direct instruction that they're going to need, to really understand the fine points and, get through the troubles and answer their questions and things like that. That's what you're there for. The content, is, being provided by all sorts of different resources. And, we're going to really be the museum curator at this kind of time to really manage all of that so that it's always fresh, always happening, and it's going to be responsive to their needs so that we can change it quickly.
Dad, I'm dying laughing because when you started reading the PowerPoint, Lindy, my sister who's here, sent me like a private message and she's like, what is he doing? Like she didn't get that you were being ironic about, like, cut him off.
My introduction?
I thought you had gone rogue and I was like, oh, this isn't what this is supposed to be about.
But the reality is right now, Elizabeth Struthers is killing it with the comments. I'm dying laughing because like one of the comments she just had was, a student said today, all the fun is gone and all that's left is the hard part. Oh. And what they probably mean is they're losing the humanness of learning. Learning is emotional work. It's about connection. It's about social connections. It's about sharing your personhood. And the thing that especially happens at higher ed that's problematic is that social presence is everything that we're showing you right now. Like, anyone, my sister's on here, my best friend's on here, what you get is what you get. I am like this when I'm presenting. I am like this when I'm tired. Like, my poor father and mother had to deal with this for 40 years so far. This is just me. And see, the struggle is real, but that's my social presence. What's also important is an instructor's cognitive presence. Okay. And that's all about like, do I have, the ability to give you new ideas, to create aha moments, to create discrepant events. And I do that by using my own expertise to curate opportunities for you to learn. That's the design process. I am not the only way for you to learn, but I can create an amazing opportunity for you to connect with other peers. I can allow you to, these resources are all great. Here's a really meaningful assignment. And also one of the most important tasks online, the way to create instructor presence is to facilitate discourse. You need to have conversations with your learners. And that could be through really robust feedback. It could be through really, really amazing conversations, using the breakout room feature, using the chat box. And the reality is a lot of online work, people will hand in. I did once an entire certificate course, and I swear to you, the most robust feedback I got was great job. Mm. Right? It's like, oh my gosh, like a computer can tell me great job. I want to hear from you. I want to hear your voice. And when we are going to provide direct instruction, it needs to be something new and unique and that is ours. We're not reading PowerPoints. We're not sharing other people's work. That is theirs, and students can get that in other ways. And this is really about creating a community. And so we've created a resource. Lindy, if you could put the resource in the chat. We created a resource of videos of what to do and what not to do. And we give an example of like, what does instructor presence look like? And what does instructor presence not look like? And what does meaningful feedback look like? And what does really crappy feedback look like? Right. And I get it. It's a lot easier to use a speed grader to say, great job, keep it up. But we need to have a conversation. And so, Dad, what are some of the biggest mistakes instructors can make besides reading off a PowerPoint that really, absolutely butcher their presence, their instructor presence?
Well, first thing they do is oftentimes is they just simply take whatever they've done on ground and stick it into the online course learning management system. Okay. Which means they're going to put their PowerPoints up there. They're going to put their own personal notes up there. And they're going to put all the exercises and assignments, and they're not going to do a thing to them to customize them to the environment. So they won't add any extra instructions or explanations. They won't add any reasons why. They won't introduce things. They'll just put it up there and they'll say, hey, this works for me on ground. Of course, it's going to work for me online. Doesn't work that way.
And so I love that. And the other thing that kills me, especially when you're talking about secondary and higher ed, is the rinse repeat for read, fill out discussion, read, right. Fill out discussion. And again, reading is a fabulous skill. If the goal is reading, that's fantastic. But why does everyone have to read the same exact thing? It's like everyone read this same article, everyone respond to this article, and the dreaded respond to two classmates.
That's right.
like for me, respond to 2 classmates. I'm like, if I want to respond to classmates, I'll respond to classmates. But you end up with a lot of like, I really like what you did there, you know? And again, it's how do we make discourse meaningful? Because when I'm having a conversation with my dad, I'm not like, you speak 2 times and then I'll speak 2 times and then it will be awesome. And yeah, Marissa's like, it's so awkward to respond to classmates. Instead, offer collaborative work, create breakout rooms, say, you know, after we read this together, go into a chat or feel free to join a Zoom, or there's so many meaningful ways to collaborate without like a forced interaction.
Right. Now, there's a nice little thing that popped up here in the chat about how one of the biggest problems that people have making the transition to online or remote learning is the loss of that immediate connection with their classroom, reading the room, you know, as they just put it. That is obviously a wonderful tool to have. And going online, it is very different, but it is not impossible to read the room in an online environment either. It's just using different tools, obviously, and really creating a different environment where it happens. Now, if you're doing an online course with a first or a second grader, obviously they don't know the rules of the road yet, you know, so you have to bring them along. So you have to be patient with this and don't expect it to happen right away. And as this will evolve and people will get more and more used to these things, they will become better and better at it and expect it. And that's when we as instructors better be ready for that wave.
So there was just this really great question, like, what do you do when students don't engage in activities? And UDL is all about firm goals and flexible means. And so, you know, it's like the goal is that you interact with classmates or me, because we need to have discourse. You know, we want to know what you're thinking about, you know, this topic. You know, the goal, you know, one of the goals of you know, many classes is, you know, to create a stance, make an argument, you know, and, you know, we'd love to hear your argument. And, you know, so you could say, you know, you can do it this way, you can do it this way, you can do it this way. And for the students who don't participate, it's just as anything, as I'm going to take that evidence and I'm going to differentiate my response as a result of it. And a lot of people think that universal design for learning negates ever having to provide differentiated instruction or specially designed instruction. But as with any teaching and learning, we have to be really student driven and evidence informed. And we need to make sure that all students meet the goals. And when we have evidence that some students aren't moving in that direction, we provide intervention. And that's what a multi-tiered system is all about, is we create the best first instruction. We create relationships with learners. You know, we truly ask them for feedback and we try to make all the options relevant and authentic and meaningful. And when we have evidence that that is not effective, that's when we have to start making some phone calls and trying to figure out what barriers did we not consider? Why is this student not making progress? And for really young learners, we need to call their families and ask them the same thing. Because, you know, this is the better we are at universal design for learning, the less you will have to differentiate instruction. Because if you say to every kid, you're going to read this article, you're going to go online, you're going to respond to 4 classmates, you're going to have a many kids who are either not going to do it or are going to call it in. I would have been a kid who just called it in. Like, you want 2 responses, you'll get exactly 2 responses and they'll be exactly 3 words each. And, you know, when we think about like, what do I want? I just want them to build empathy by realizing that other people have different opinions than them. And when I ask them to take a stance on a series of articles and a series of primary source documents, you know, I want to know what they think and I want others to know what they think. So I'm going to provide them with many platforms to share what they're thinking, sentence stems so they can, you know, share with each other. And I'm going to connect with kids who don't meet that goal and say, what did I miss? You know, because I really want you to be a part of it. And in some ways, this gives us the autonomy to be incredibly creative. I was grading, I'm teaching a graduate course right now in Universal Design for Learning, and I was grading one of the assignments, and literally the person said that she was teaching all about different parts of the brain, and, you know, talking about when brain injuries happen to certain parts of the brain, what's the impact of that? She was a science teacher, that was the standard. So she mailed every one of her kids a white swimming cap. You know, like a cheapy, you pull it over your head swimming cap, and a thing of markers. And she's like, okay, the assessment is like, you make this crazy and we're all going to come on Zoom at the same time and we're going to be wearing our brains. And she's like, Like, honestly, every kid was, these are high school kids. They were so excited to like show off their ridiculous drawings on their brains, you know, and it's like that, you know, to say, you know, sure, you're welcome to take the original test, or you can do the swimming cap thing. Let me know if you want one. And she's like, everyone wanted one. So, you know, I love the idea of instructor presence doesn't only mean we facilitate discourse with our learners, is that we have to facilitate discourse with us and our learners. And again, the better you are at the initial design, the fewer kids you're going to have to, you know, actually respond, to be responsive to. But like UDL doesn't exist in a vacuum. You know, there's no way for me to perfectly design something and guarantee that every kid's going to get it. But when I can predict barriers and I can design, you know, creating a lot of pathways, and then I'm continually responsive, students actually become my greatest source of professional development. Because when they can tell me where my blind spots are, I can design better, not only for that kid the next time, but what is necessary for some is absolutely good for all. And so it's really, really important that we really embrace our own presence. We put out our personhood. We let people see our cats and our plants, you know, and we let them see when we're struggling and when the internet goes down in the middle of a webinar and we're heartbroken. That's real, and that's how you create your personhood. So Dad, one of the big things here is that like, we want to make sure that we are not only, not just talking the talk and saying people should have numerous ways to interact, but we also need to walk the walk. And so what we want to do next is we want to give you an opportunity to check in with each other and to discuss this concept of instructor presence. And again, this is all about really firm goals and flexible means. How flexible can we be? How many options can we provide for students to learn, for students to interact, for students to share what they know? And so what we want to do here is we now want to give you 3 minutes to actually, you know, practice facilitating discourse here. And so if we're going to keep everybody afloat, we want to keep people active. So you're going to have a 3-minute opportunity, and you can either go into a breakout room and discuss. I'll create breakout rooms that you can go into and you can have a face-to-face conversation. If that's not your bag, you're just going to stay here in the lobby. Just don't accept the invite to go to the breakout room. And you're going to just think quietly. You can send a tweet. There's a hashtag if you want to do that. You could use the chat box, again, if you'd rather stay and have your voice heard that way. It's really up to you. And it depends on, number one, what you can access. Some of you might be driving and you can't access a breakout room. And then also what you're interested in doing. If you have some really deep thoughts and you'd like feedback on those thoughts, we've also put our emails in there. So if you want to start drafting an email, like you have a question, you can do that too. So your options are, we want to facilitate discourse and reflection. You can either join a breakout room, you can stay in the lobby and use the chat feature, or you can just ponder, or you can draft an email to us. And when you think about it, you know, think about how you can increase your instructor presence, because again, the magic of learning is emotional work. It is about relationships. It is about connections. And if it was just about content, we wouldn't need teachers. We need teachers because we are the glue that create memorable learning experiences. We are the only people who can be responsive and really target what students need. And we are the only thing in the world that can say, I am here for you. I see you. What do you need from design that I can provide? A textbook can't do that. An app can't do that. So those are your choices. I am going to stop the share for a moment. I will pull it back up for those of you who stay in the lobby, but I'm going to create breakout rooms a little bigger than normal because I know that some of you are going to choose not to join them. So for those of you who choose to go into breakout rooms, again, we're going to give you 3 minutes just to check in with some new friends and talk about what you have learned about instructor presence. So again, you can choose to accept it, or you can absolutely choose not to accept it, stay in the lobby, and I'll call everybody back in about 3 minutes. Alrighty, so let's see. Here we go. You should receive an invite. It only accept it if you want to. If you want to stay in the lobby, I will put back up the slide and we'll monitor the chat.
Wow, everybody's going into rooms.
That's the magic of choice. I'm sure we'll have people who stay here with us, and that is just beautiful as well. webinar.
Okay, so you can reshare the screen now. I think it's the activity slowed down here.
Okay, hold on. I just want to make sure that there's no rooms with no one in there. Okay, that one has 2 people. I'm just going through and making sure that everyone has at least somebody to talk to. And that is working beautifully. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so Dad, while I'm just looking to make sure that there's no breakout rooms that are empty, can you just check out the chat and see if there's any questions there?
Yep, I have been, and basically they've been sharing some interesting ideas on how they have been trying to personalize their course by sharing pictures of their Labradoodle.
Oh,
which we have one now in our home. Our son has one. How do you handle the technology issues for schools? Now that's a big one. Obviously, going to remote learning as quickly as we all had to really expose the problems of the digital divide and just the normal everyday problems that technology brings to a family. You know, no one really stopped to think that, you know, in a household of 4 kids who are all in, you know, school, you know, through K through 12, that all 4 of them would have to get on to do schoolwork at the same time that their parents would have to not only watch them and, you know, feed them and take care of them, but teach them and do their regular 9-to-5 job. You know, the router that you need, the Wi-Fi network that you need in the house to handle 4 or 6 devices at the same time, all going online and streaming video is huge. A lot of companies really stepped up. I know in Massachusetts, Comcast jumped right in and they gave free service to everybody, you know, for a limited amount of time. The phone companies who provided internet access did the same things. You know, these things were really terrific. The vendors started jumping in to provide services. For instance, on the college level, Autodesk provides all of their software for free for students, but Adobe decided to do the same thing right off the bat. Just let students use the software free for 90 days. But, you know, as we've seen through some of the comments here in the chat room, not everybody has a camera, not everybody has a mic, not everybody's camera and mic works well. You know, how do you deal with these things? The best thing you can do is provide some robust support. First and foremost, that is available, you know, at a very, very wide range of time. You know, 24/7 is a dream, especially for a local school system. But, you know, if you can provide it 9 to 5 or 8 to 6, those kinds of things, and have, you know, the technology people who are already in the schools pitching in and taking hours on the phone, basically, to support whoever comes in or answering the emails that come in. A lot of school systems have gone really deeply, and, you know, they have already had one-on-one services so that every student would have a computer. But the schools that didn't got into it really, really quickly, and there was drive-by pickup and those kinds of things. It's really just takes everybody to get involved and to work through the issues and to recognize that and to admit to the fact that this is going to be a little bit shaky at the beginning. You know, we can get through this together. Let's just work one day at a time and make this happen. And you know, lots of stories have come up of how people have really jumped in and done, you know, some Herculean efforts to make this work. And it's a challenge still, but it's getting a little bit better every day. And I think, you know, as we prolong this through the summer, that people will be ready if we have to do something like this in the fall as well. So how are we doing, Kate?
I just closed all the rooms, so everyone will be coming back here in within the next minute.
Yep.
And again, it's a technique that, you know, you just basically have to flood the rooms with way more people than you'd need. So I did that. So there'd be about 8 people in a room. And in some cases I had to move people out. And so, you know, a lot of the times we're like, everyone go into breakout rooms. And then there's all these people left in the lobby who, you know, had to walk away from the computer for a minute, and providing that choice, you know, will allow you to see. Now, I mean, we're not going to be able to monitor quickly where all 300 people went, but in a class of 30, we absolutely could, you know, who posted in the chat, who went into the breakout rooms, who sent me an email, who posted on Twitter. Okay, so we're gonna wait. Almost everybody is back. We're up to 232. Let's see, I have to see how many more people. 3 seconds, 3 and 2 and 1, and breakout rooms are closed. We're back. Look at our numbers keep growing.
Interestingly, nobody emailed in that time. Nobody put a tweet on Twitter in that time. You wonder, you know, how much our age groups affect our choices, right? So it's just interesting to see how it all works, and how adaptable you have to be. You provide choices. Some of these choices won't get chosen.
And now here's the magic. This is how we're going to model the importance of feedback. So that was only 3 minutes. If it was a real course, we'd give you a lot more time. Yep. But, you know, in those 3 minutes, you know, what I want you to say is what we were able to come up with was we wanted an opportunity for interaction. We know that some of you might be on your phones on a walk or listening or driving. So we can't require you to use the chat because we can anticipate that some of you don't have the ability to type. We also anticipate that some of you don't have a camera, you know, and so you might not have a device that allows you to be inside of the breakout room. We can't require that. You know, we know that, you know, some of you don't have a phone and you might not have a Twitter account, so we can't require that, right? And what we're doing is we're saying, we know that there are barriers. So what are the options that we can create so more people can be a part of it? Now, what I would always say as an instructor is what other options would have been really awesome that we did not think of? Now, again, in 3 minutes, there's not a ton of options, but imagine that it was 20 minutes. Imagine it was really sit down to write an email, you know, be a part of this chat, you know, and continue to watch us present, you know, go over there into the breakout room. And, you know, what you want to think about is, oh, an Instagram story, that would have been really cool. So in the next class, when we break out for interaction, we're going to offer an Instagram story. Oh, Flipgrid, you know, that's really cool. Okay. So you see where I'm going with this. We have now co-created the options that are going to be available for you in the next class that we hold. And that's how, again, we're facilitating, oh, text a colleague. I love text a colleague, you know.
And it changes the whole relationship, doesn't it? I mean, instead of us teaching them, we're teaching together. We're teaching with people. We're not teaching to people. We're giving them options and choices, and the whole dynamic can change. People will take control or will get involved and engaged if they have an option to do it on their own terms.
Yeah. And then again, you may have students or learners that, again, even when given those options, don't participate. And then I would follow up individually. The numbers are going to be really small when you do this for a while. You know, at first you might have a handful, and I'm going to reach out and be like, oh my gosh, I so want you to participate. You know, can I make a TikTok? Yes. I would love for you to make a TikTok. That would be awesome. Can you add me as a friend? No, that's lame. Okay, then how will I see it, right? Like I tried, my son uses TikTok and I tried to add him as a friend. He's like, can you make a fake account? I'm like, I'm not going to make well, I did make a fake account so I could see what he's doing, but like, I'm not going to make a fake account to be your friend. You're going to be friends with your mommy. So, you know, that's where we are. So right now I'm going to go back to the presentation. We've talked a lot about instructor presence. We've modeled how to provide multiple means of engagement in an online space.
The speed dating format.
In a what?
In a speed dating format.
In a speed dating format with my helmet uniform. And now we are going to, again, we got a couple of questions before the webinar. This question about executive functioning, the ability to, when given a task for the week, actually follow through on that, and how it requires your ability to put in effort and persistence. Okay. And so how can you, through your own presence, actually create opportunities for students to be better at creating strategies and following through? And I always think of this Rita Pearson TED Talk, which I love, where she said, like, kids don't learn from people they don't like. And the reality is that we can provide an option of a timeline. We can provide an option of deadlines. We can give scaffolds and things like that. But in class, when we're face to face, we have an opportunity to check in, to say, how are you doing? Like, where are you at? And I think that it's really important that we are clear about providing opportunities for students to create their own strategies. Okay, because a lot of people say they don't have great executive function. When do we actually allow them to practice executive function? Executive function is the ability to set a goal. We set goals for kids all the time. Like, we don't allow them to set goals, we set their goals. It's about being able to create a strategy. Again, we say, you're going to read this, you're going to watch this, you're going to do this. That actually it doesn't require any executive function. It requires a robotic compliance. It's about managing resources. We give them the resources. You're going to read this, then you're going to fill out this graphic organizer, then you're going to hand it in on this Google form, and then monitor progress. Okay. What we do is we say, gosh, we need this from you. I want you to think about how you can actually create opportunities and check-ins where students are creating their own strategy. To say, here is the standard for this week. I want all of you to know this. Here's going to be your opportunities. Think about what you can access. Think about what you can engage with. Think about the best times for you and your family to do work. When do you have access to the internet? Do you have to wait to the weekend to do that? We need to help learners actually create their own strategies. And a lot of state guidance on creating remote learning plans is saying, don't push the synchronous sessions, because for kiddos who, there's 4 kids sharing a device and mom and dad need to be on broadband, or, grandma or whoever's home, when we say we need this done at 9 a.m., you're going to join this call at 10 a.m., you're going to hand this in by Tuesday morning. We are failing to embrace the culture and the identity of our students in the homes in which they live. And we are putting kind of our dominant culture and our beliefs about what can be accomplished in a certain amount of time on students who may not have that support at home. And in a classroom, because we can control that environment, we have the capacity to say, you're going to work on this during this time. But we have kids who are, watching younger siblings, who are essential workers at grocery stores, who don't have access to any sort of support or help, who don't have strong internet. And when you think about that, it becomes so important to not only be responsive, but to say ahead of time, to be proactive, to say, I want to hear from you what your strategy is going to be this week. I want to know if you feel like you cannot meet the Zoom lessons, because I'll provide an option to connect with you one-on-one. I'm going to pre-record my lectures just in case you're working at that time. That requires a very different type of thinking about teaching and learning, as opposed to, this is what I want to do, and this is how I'm going to fix it for these learners. These are the barriers that students might face, and this is how I'm going to design it for all learners. And so it's really about those connections, those relationships, the opportunity to say to kids, how are you doing? What barriers are you facing at home? Asking, do you have to work? Do you have to watch younger siblings? Do you have anyone at home to support you? Those are really important questions that we can say, I'm going to ask you questions, and I want you to answer them in a way that makes the most sense to you. You can fill out the Google form. You can also write me a quick email and tell me how things are going. If you want to schedule a call, here's my office hours, plug them in. Text me your phone number, I'll give you a call. But how often do we give our learners opportunities to kind of troubleshoot proactively, as opposed to waiting until they fail and then swooping in? And so that's a really important part of this work as well, because I'm always hearing, gosh, these learners, they haven't done anything in 3 weeks. It should never get to 3 weeks.
Right.
Okay? It should be from the beginning.
So it's very important at some point in time, a lot of people worry about the fact that, if I give them all of these choices, what happens if they choose the wrong one, or if they don't do anything, and that's really probably the best moment you could ever have, because you get a free teaching moment right there. You get to connect to that student, not only to ask them, what happened and why. You can be human and flexible and really dig down into the reasons what the barriers were. And so that for the next time, they know you're expecting something, first and foremost, that you care about them doing it, and that you're watching and put those three things together, you know, and they won't usually do that often.
And so we want to know if you have any specific questions, because again, this is about a conversation with you, those of you who are here right now. And so we predicted, you know, like what some of the questions were going to be. Some of you sent in your questions ahead of time. We've been answering some questions as they come up in the chat. But if you have any specific questions, again, feel free to put those in the chat. Feel free to post them on Twitter. We're going to both check our phones if you're more of a social media lover. And also, again, if you'd like to have a more extended conversation about this, you have a question that you don't want to ask everybody, feel free to email one of us and we can either email you back or we can schedule a phone call. And I think another thing that's really incredibly important about all of this is that sometimes we have questions that we don't want to be public. So an amazing feature of Zoom is that you can actually send me a private question. If you go into the chat, it's automatically set to send to everyone, but you can send it just for me. And I will read a question out loud. And I know that some of my colleagues are here, and I do this in every meeting, is I will be buried with the name of the person who has a private question. So sometimes we'll have district-wide meetings and I'll say, does anyone have any questions? And there are very few. And then I'll say, remember, you can send them in a private chat, and then I'll have 10. And I'll say, okay, so one says, and that way you can ask really specific questions. So let's see, it says, would you agree that for some students, they will need fewer options? I believe that everyone almost needs fewer options. There is a lot of research on something called the paradox of choice. And when there are too many choices and too many options, some people get a choice paralysis. It's like, I don't know what to choose. Never go over 10. A magic number is really closer to 5. What I would say is, you know, let's say that you give 5 options for all learners. If you're dealing with students who are, let's say, English learners or special education, receive special education services, you're also collaborating or consulting with a related service provider. And what I would do is always consult with that person. And like, given this student's goals, would it be beneficial to kind of modify the number of choices? You know, because, you know, one of the barriers would be, you know, increased anxiety about making choice. But again, I always like to provide those choices first. You know, I don't like to be, you know, it's like, here's all the choices. And, you know, if you're struggling, if you haven't been able to make a choice in 5 minutes, you know, come over here and I'll work with you. Another thing that I used to do is I used to always make 6 choices and hand the kids a dice. And I would say, like, if you're really stuck, like if you really don't know which one to pick, just roll the dice and do what the dice says. And if you hate the thing the dice says, at least you know which one you don't want to do. So I think that is important. And I believe the same is true for students with significant disabilities. Is, you know, I taught in a district where I was a co-taught teacher, and we did have students with, you know, moderate to very severe and significant disabilities. But, you know, the design would be, you know, if I said, for instance, I want you to learn more about instructor presence. And I said something like, one of the options is to read this peer-reviewed research article on, you know, those 5 aspects of instructor presence. Another one is to, you know, we'll record another video and we'll talk about it and you can watch that video. You know, here's a podcast that talks about instructor presence. You know, here's a number of different clips of instructors. I want you to watch all those clips and talk about which ones have presence and which ones don't, right? If I'm working with a student with a moderate to severe disability and they have an IEP, they also have a special education liaison who I'm going to consult with. And, you know, they're going to help me design options like watch a bunch of those videos and decide whether or not, you know, the person has some presence or doesn't have presence, you know, and that might be that then the specially designed instruction that happens for that student is, we're going to watch all these movies and you're going to give it a thumbs up, thumbs down. You know, do you like the person? Do you think they're cool? Do you think they're funny? Do you not like them? Why not? So again, UDL is the foundation. Differentiated instruction is the next layer of the cake. And specially designed instruction is also a part of that beautiful dance, because students with really significant disabilities need more intensive supports in addition to UDL, not instead of UDL. So Dad, I'm going to throw the next question for you. It says, wait, Dad, that's your question.
It wasn't a question. It was a response.
Okay. So a question mark, it threw me off. Okay. So somebody just sent me a private question. I love private questions. It says, I do professional development for teachers. I'm doing a session on universally designed PD. when it comes to multiple means of representation in a learning management system, what can be used besides a video, an article, or an infographic? And what I like to think is like different modalities. So I always try to provide a video. I always try to provide a podcast. I always try to provide something research-based. There are some people who need to see the evidence. Then something more conversational like a blog. And then I'll usually like record something on my own. Another option for that is that, you know, if you're working with adult learners and it's an ongoing process, another thing is to use one professional learning session for groups of teachers to jigsaw and actually create the content that's going to be another option. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if we're talking about digital portfolios, you know, it might be, you know, here's a great article about digital portfolios, here's a great blog, here's an actual digital portfolio, and now you 6 go through all of those, understand what it is, and then go find more resources. So there's a lot of ways to co-create things together. But again, one of the other things I started doing in the graduate courses that I've taught is instead of just having like a dump of links for resources, I try to align them for UDL. So the why, the what, the how. So if I'm talking about instructor presence, the first thing would say, inspire me. And it would be like why it's so important. And then it would be, teach me. And it would be, what are all the different aspects of instructor presence? And then the last is show me. And then that would be, you know, videos of people with great instructor presence, syllabus that have great instructor presence. And so we've started designing all of our courses that way. So it's not only here are a bunch of resources, it's these are resources to help you understand why this is important. Here's resources to help you understand what it is. And this is resources to understand how to do it. So that's been something that we've moved towards. Our most recent UDL Now course is the first time we've done it. And that seems to be working really, really well.
You can also think about using some external tools to further spice up the whole process. You know, things like Linuit boards and Padlet boards and things like that have to be chosen properly for the, you know, the situation, but can offer a different way of collaboration outside of the learning management system, which is usually doesn't give you a heck of a lot of flexibility and choice. But many of these tools are free. So, you know, don't be afraid to expand outside of the learning management system to use other tools.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So again, the magic of this is really, really, truly, everyone can learn. Everyone can learn unequivocally. And, you know, we have these goals, and a lot of the times those goals are so tangled. They're so tangled with kind of our own design barriers that, like, when students aren't learning, it's really easy to say, you know, the barrier is with the learner. And UDL helps us to say the barrier is somewhere in the design, because based on the context, everyone can be successful. You know, variability is really contextual, you know, and, you know, long and far were the days where we said, you know, oh, those kids are never going to do it. And it's like, but that assumes that people are static and people are dynamic, and in certain contexts, and when given the right supports and when given the right expectations and when given the right motivation, everybody can move forward towards goals. And that includes when we're providing opportunities to learn remotely. And I think another thing that's really important is I've seen a lot of people in kind of the UDL world almost slip into a more differentiated instruction way of thinking, where when we're compartmentalizing students and thinking about, this is how I want to design my learning online, and then for all the kids who don't have access to the internet, I'm going to do this other thing. And you have to remember that UDL is about, you know, what is necessary for some is good for all. So yes, you absolutely are going to need the option for some learning that doesn't require access to an internet. You know, we might have to mail home agendas to offer the option for parents to pick them up, to drop them off, right? But that should not only be for students who don't have access to the internet, because you have many learners that have access and devices, and that's not a super accessible way for them to learn. And the same is true if you send home a packet. Okay, maybe the packet is accessible because they don't have a computer, but is the packet providing options and choices? So this becomes like so big and so complex, because this is not about internet, not internet. This is about what barriers do students face that would prevent them from growing and learning and being inspired and working towards goals. And the best way to figure out what avenues we need to create is to start with those relationships. Again, to universally design as much as we can. And when we see that students aren't making progress, to reach out to them, to reach out to their families, and then say, tell me about your day. Tell me what you can do to support the student. You know, what type of options would work for you? And then once I create that option for you, Tom Thibodeau, I'm going to offer it to everyone. I'm going to say, does anyone else want this? Because that is what is the magic of universal design. So as we go through here at the end, you know, what we started at the beginning is we said we wanted you to understand how instructor presence increases engagement. We want you to understand how, you know, really thinking about, you know, how long do we have, what barriers do we face, how that allows us to create multiple options and choices. And then lastly, how do we create like a design of a course or a syllabus or resources so that we have multiple means of representation? So this is, you know, Fireside coffee chat, you know, in 280 characters or less, we're going to ask you to address one of those prompts. And again, if you cannot use the chat, you know, you certainly have the option to focus on going onto Twitter or sending us an email. All of those options are yours. Okay. But for this last minute here, we just want you to reflect on any of these questions. You have a choice of the question. You have a choice of whether you want to chat it, you want to just ponder it, you want to tweet it, you want to email it. All of those are options. And while you're doing that, I am going to focus on these questions. Somebody just made a really great point and said, does every child have to complete every option? And they put the answer themselves. No, okay? This is not variety. This is choice. Variety is, okay, variety is different. Variety is, I do this all the time. Last week we watched a movie. This week we wrote an essay. Next week we're making a diorama. That's variety. Choice is, do you want to make a movie? Do you want to make a diorama? Do you want to write a poem? Or do you want to do this? But those can only be the choices if the goal is super crystal clear, because we all have to be working towards the next goal. So I love that comment. Somebody else said, keep the packet thought in mind. The packet needs options. Yes, Shannon, the packet needs options. That's amazing. So, you know, sending home, you know, choose 5 of these, or even within a packet. Like, I remember my kiddos last year, they had like this amazing kind of homework menu, which was, you know, as you're working on reading this week, here's a bunch of things you can do. You know, find a book and read to a teddy bear, find a book and read a pet, listen to a book on your phone, you know, bring home a book from our class library, read the newspaper. Like, we can put so many options. And again, we need to embrace that what is beautiful is what makes us different. And what is beautiful about robots is they're the same, and they're boring, and they have no presence, and they get screwed up all the time because technology is not reliable. But we're people, we're reliable. Okay, so Deddy, any last words?
You know, this is a great adventure. If you are a little bit tired and feel like you're doing always the same thing in your classroom and now stuck in an online environment where it's feeling even worse, think about UDL, and I guarantee you, even if the thought of correcting 5 different options on an assignment is a little daunting to you, you will enjoy the bejeebas out of it. It is so much better than going through a stack of papers where you can't read the writing and they're all saying the same thing. You know, that variety is going to lift you up like you won't believe.
Yes. And that's the beauty of UDL. And that is the beauty of what's going on here with the alt. I'm so mad. I really feel angry that you can all see this. Why doesn't it like this tufts of hair? This is like my signature move. It's like, it's like my dad / Daddy Zuckerberg with his sweatshirt. That's his thing.
Right. I have a full head of hair. Why isn't it showing?
Oh my gosh, Dad, and no one can see your full head of hair. What's happening? Well, hopefully we were able to model as much as possible the value of instructor presence, the importance of multiple means of action and expression. Hopefully we were able to talk about how you can provide multiple means of representation. And again, you're here because this was an option. And if you want to learn more about this, you can definitely, we put a link to that resource on UDL on the cloud. There's a bunch of pretty fun videos in there, and we will email out this recording, the transcript, the chat box, which has all of the chats except those that were sent privately. And also we'll give you a link to that resource so you can learn more about it. So thank you so, so much. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks with another Fireside Chat.
Excellent. Enjoy, stay well, stay safe.